Good evening, everyone. I'm very, very delighted to be here tonight and to introduce the panel speakers. First of all, I would like to mention that this event, book launch, screening, and debate around Persepolis, is part of the Generation Equality Forum. The forum is a global gathering for gender equality, co-hosted by the government of France and Mexico in partnership with civil society. It's a great honor to have you with us tonight, Marjan Satrapi. Thank you so much, Marjan, for having accepted to join us for this book launch of Persepolis in Hindi, 14 years after its French version. You co-wrote and co-directed the animated film version of Persepolis, which was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. You are also a figurative painter, and last November you exhibited in Paris these hypnotizing paintings of women. It was a challenge for you, Aditi Maheshwari, to publish this graphic novel in Hindi. Aditi, you run Vani Group, a 57-year-old independent publishing group dedicated to publish best literary of Indian language, best literature in Indian language, especially in Hindi and English. You work with the editor and translator Nidheesh Tyagi, who is also poet, writer, and digital media consultant journalist for about 20 years. Apu Pen, good evening, Apu Pen. Apu Pen is a famous graphic designer, author, and artist from Bangalore. But you are not in Bangalore, you are in Angoulême, in the French city of BD Comics, where you are in residence for 6 months. You are the creator of the Legends of Hala Hala series, and Rastraman is your superhero in your comic series. Thank you for joining us. And Vishwajyoti Ghosh, our moderator of this debate tonight. You are also a reputed graphic novelist from Delhi. You are the author of the graphic novel Delhi Calm, set in the 70s, about the period referred to as the emergency. You also curated the graphic anthology This Side, That Side, Restoring Partition, on the partition of India, with 48 artists and storytellers from India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. You currently dividing your time between drawing stories and podcasting stories. Ghosh, it's your turn.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you, French Institute, for having this magnificent event. This is absolutely unbelievable that we are actually talking to Marjan Satrapi live. I have met Marjan in 2004, and she wouldn't remember. It was only for 1 minute, 30 seconds. On the streets of Angoulême. I was introduced to her by Emmanuel Goubert from l'Association, and it was just a very short meeting, and that's where it ended. I never thought I'll meet her again, and today I meet her 20 years later. So this is like super. So big thank you, Marjan, and the people in this part of the world are listening to you for the first time, are hearing you for the first time live. So it's a big event for the Indian graphic novelists. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm going to... Okay. Sorry.
Great. That wasn't my mobile. Okay. So
mine.
Okay. I actually came across Persepolis in 2002 when there was a little workshop in the French Center book office here on Bande Dessinée, which is comics. And l'Association had sent Guy Delisle, who has done the books like Shenzhen and Pyongyang. And he had referred me to this book. That time only, I think, Persepolis 1 and 2 were released. And he said, you must read this book. And I said, why are you showing me this book? So he said, because it's set in Iran. So I said, are you showing me because I'm an Asian? He said, no, because it's a very good book talking about a memory. So I was like, wow. And I actually read some parts of it in 2003 when the English version wasn't out, but I had made friends in La Association, and I used to go to their office and I used to read some photocopies that they were drafting the translations of. So I got a first preview. So what is interesting for me when I read those first pages, Marjan, was actually it brought me to my own childhood. I'm talking about early 80s here, when the war in Iran-Iraq war was still there, and a lot of Iranian students were coming to Delhi to study. Yeah, and they would tell us these stories, and once I started reading your pages, I was like, oh my God, there's something like that happened. Yeah, I remember this. I didn't remember the name of the person, but I remembered that story. So for me, it was going back, negotiating with my own childhood. So the first question I would really like to know, I ask you, is a very intellectual one. But before that, the audience must know the small little story of the 4 stitches on your head that made you write Persepolis. And that's a very fascinating story for me.
Well, basically, I mean, this story, I have said it all the time because, you go through something. I mean, as a child, because I was like 9 years when the revolution happened, and I was 10 years old when the war happened. And I left my country when I was 14. And, people, they don't understand, like always when you just go somewhere, people, they have the feeling, why are they coming? And they judge you because of what you're escaping. They judge you exactly for the same reasons. So the story, I've been saying it over and over. And the problem of the human being is that the less they know and the more convinced about everything, I don't know, ignorance brings lots of conviction. So basically, the more you know that the situation is complicated. So it's nuanced, and but ignorance leads to very deep belief. So I was just saying this story over and over and over, and it was not so much that I don't like to talk, but I just repeating myself was a little bit kind of boring. And when I came to France in '94, I thought, oh, French people, they will know more, they will be better than the Austrian. No, but it's the same kind of ignorance because, you create a kind of stereotype, and then everything has to go inside this stereotype. And so, I was just talking and talking. And at one point I was like, I have to do something out of it. And the first idea was that I wanted to write a book, but I don't know. The second, I always write a book. I mean, maybe now with the age and, like distance and all of that, I will get better. But at the time, it was like, okay, now it's like I have to be like Dostoevsky, I have to be like Hemingway. So I took it, I have to be very serious. And therefore, I just completely lost, my sense of humor. And each time I wrote something, I was reading it and I was like, oh, this is crap, it's really bad. And then I realized that actually, because I came to France and bande dessinée, comics is such a big deal. First of all, I was introduced, with the comics that they were not just superhero comics. And I understood that it was just a media, and it really helped me because I really wanted to draw and I wanted to write. I never thought that comics would be like kind of a good media for me because it's like a work of a monk. You have to be extremely obsessional about things, and you have to be very concentrated. And I never thought that I was either concentrated or obsessional. It's really like a work of a monk. Like you're sitting in your monastery, just drawing frame after frame. I never thought that was actually my temperament. Surprisingly enough, I realized that actually I was extremely obsessional, and I was really a monk deep inside myself. And the fact of using this language of comics helped me actually to tell the story by using, some distance and, to be able to use, the sense of humor. And that is what makes it universal. Because basically, the humor is the highest degree of the understanding of the other one. In the language, we have different level of understanding. We can talk about objects, table, book, whatever we show is fine. Then we talk about instinct, me hungry, me, I don't know, thirsty, whatever. Everybody understands too. And the people around the world, we all cry for the same reasons. We cry, our mother is sick, we lost our dad, our lover left us, our child, blah, blah, blah. But do we laugh for the same reasons? No. So to my big surprise, the thing that actually made me laugh, because, it's not because you leave a revolution and war that you're, sitting from the morning until the night, mourning and crying and On the contrary, when it's the war, you know that each bomb might end your life. So this is the time, to celebrate your life, is now or never. So that was very important. And I think that is where the connection was made, because, like people, they get, into, as humor is something extremely abstract, is the highest degree of the understanding of the other one. I think through this humor, people, they got it. And also it became a universal story, because, the story of a dictatorship, no matter where it happens, that is Iran, that is, I don't know, anywhere, it's the same. Like people, they come, they take the power, they create a climate of fear. The fear turns people into cowards, and then there you go. And then you just rule them, and then you do whatever you want to do with them. So that was it. So that was really the beginning of it. And I never thought, really, I mean, when I made it, I was sure, completely certain, that it will never, ever get published. And when it got published, I thought that, okay, I'd like, I don't know, 300 European people who have bad conscience and they want to help the poor Iranian girl who came to France will buy the book, to feel good about themselves. And then suddenly it became a huge success. But I was not expecting that at all. Never.
But do you think why am I?
You're very good.
Yeah. Okay. So is humor something that you discovered while you were making this book? I mean, of course, you always had a sense of humor, but to use humor as a tool is it something that comes to you while making this book? But then you say, okay, now I'm going to actually negotiate my memory through humor.
Well, of course, because I wrote actually a first version of story. I wrote it about I don't know, 1.5 years before I had the real version of Persepolis, the first tome of the book. I had a version, and I made I don't know 30-40 pages of that, and then I left it aside, and I said, okay, I will just rest like 2 weeks, and I will read it again. And my God, was I angry. I was just completely angry. And I'm like, okay, so here you are using exactly the same language, the rhetoric, everything, as the fanatics, with this vision that you're on the right side and they're on the wrong side. So you have exactly the same hatred. You're exactly like them. So it's no difference between you and them. Only you judge that they are on the bad side and you're on the good side. Because so I became a fanatic myself, because fanaticism, how does it work? It works with the emotion. You press on the button of the emotion of the people and they go out yelling, crying, shouting, blowing, whatever. If you're not a fanatic, you have to think. And from the second you think, you have to ask yourself question. I mean, it's very easy to say, oh, somebody is a monster. Yeah, the monster exists. But the most important is like, how come this person became a monster? I mean, nobody is born a monster. I mean, this person, at one point, he was a 2-3 years old child having a little ball, being very cute, enjoying an ice cream. And suddenly he became a murderer, a political murderer. What happened? What happened? Like, what does it lead us here? And this is the real question. And when I read the first version, I was like, I was hating myself for it because it was not good. I was exactly like them. So I was like, okay, now you have to be intelligent. And the way of being intelligent is not to use the same weapon. You have to show the example. And how do you talk about everything? I could complain, like, oh, me, poor me, no. But you complain when it's bearable. You complain when it's still, it's something you can have a hold on. What we went through, it was quite unbearable. So either, I have to commit a suicide or I have to laugh about it. There is no third way. I cannot just sit and complain all the time. So, it was very important to have a distance. And with the distance comes the humor. But I know, like in my country, in Iran, we dealt with everything. Like during the war, that was like the worst jokes about the war, because, like people, they dying for nothing. We send our kids, young boys, 18 to, 22 years old, and still we are doing that, to just go and die for some reason. It's unbearable. So if still you don't make joke about them neither, then you cannot just live with it anymore. So yeah. So that
it's very interesting because, you know, when you say the power of humor, using the tool of humor, and I do not want to be a fanatic, so I use humor as a language. It's very interesting. And it's more interesting because you've always said that Persepolis was never a political act for you. It was an act to get things out of your system. It was an act of even rebellion for you. Okay, that I want to say these things.
No, it's not really a rebellious act. It's, you know, the thing is that what I wanted to say, I had something to say because, you know, basically you come to the West, and so you have my country. Before is the country of the 1,000 of one night, and, you know, we have the king, and we have a queen, and then we have the flying carpets, and we have all of that, and suddenly, poof, something happens, and everybody forgets about all this thing, and suddenly we are the same people. 1 year after, we are terrorists, and we are bad, and, you know, nobody can meet us, etc. So this is exactly what it happened. So the story, I had to say it just to give, listen, there is another version of the story, but then I cannot make it like, oh, I'm going to make this political act, because if I write it, you know, like, this is what happened, that means that I put myself in a situation where I pretend to be a historian or a politician or a sociologist. I'm not none of that. I'm just a person who is born in a certain place, in a certain time that I did not choose, that happened. I can be completely unsure about everything. It's something that I know is what I have lived. And thank God I don't have so much qualities, but I have a very good memory. So I could really, really remember, you know, the feeling, how it was. And I also make researches also, because, you know, you write something that becomes a historical document. So, you know, what I have to write has to be accurate. So, you know, I cannot just trust, you know, like my memories. I also made lots of studies and all of that. But this thing on gold that, you know, just, you know, I didn't anybody, you know, to like us or whatever. Just, you know, just consider us just as a human being, just that, and not the abstract notion. Because, you know, it just goes by the ignorance, you know, like human being, they always have to know who is evil. Evil is somebody, is a nation. It has a geographical address. It's a certain type, and it changes. So, you know, at one point is the USSR with a bad communist. Then that is the UFOs that come from the space. Then it was the Iranian. Then it was something else. Then we became the axis of evil. Then, you know, Saddam was their best friend. Then Iraqi, they became you know, it always changes the place. So, you know, unfortunately for us, we oscillated between being evil and the axis of evil. So I don't know if it was being upgraded or downgraded, but anyway, it was somewhere moving, you know, from the axis to the evil itself. But this is it. But it was this need of saying it. It was not therapeutical, because I talk a lot and I express myself enough that, you know, I don't need to write a book. And I don't think it's an autobiography neither, because basically autobiography is a book that you write. You have problems with your mother, your sister, you don't like them, your family, you hate them, your husband, whatever. You write a book and you solve all your problem in the book, telling them directly or indirectly how much you hate them. This is an autobiography most of the time. I had to use myself because, as I said, I was not a politician, no historian, no sociologist. And I use myself to tell a story that is bigger than me. And it is like, okay, so as a human being, you are born in a place, and suddenly all the reason of the world, they become bigger than your own personal reason. You as an individual, you stop existing. They decide for you what you have to wear. They decide for you what music you have to listen to, or you shouldn't even listen to music. They decide for you everything. Okay, so in the middle of all of that, you still have a brain. So how do you do to grow up in that? How do you do to keep your freedom of thinking? How do you do to stay a human being and not become this animal who is on his four leg and he can just whip and he does whatever you want you to do? So that was the deal. And it found echo in this way in anybody who lived this kind of experiences. More, of course, you know, like country like Chile, I don't know, China, the places where you have a really dictatorship, it connects with them. But surprisingly, even for the democracy, you know, people, they made connection. Like my biggest surprise one day I was in America, and that was this guy from Arkansas, and he did not have the right to listen to rock music. Why? Because his parents, they were this hardcore Christian, and for them, rock and roll was the music of the devil. So he was forbidden to listen to music. So it was very funny to see a guy born exactly the same as me. In 1984, he didn't have the right to listen to rock music in Arkansas, USA, for religious reason. And I had exactly the same thing, wow, miles away in my country. So you see, this is the beauty also, that actually you can make connection with everyone, no matter where they come from. It's always something you can understand.
Which is why this book has become such a big rage across the world, because people have made their own connections. So it's not necessarily that they've been sitting in Iran or they want to know anything specifically about Iran, but they have found their own little Marjans in a million ways through the characters and something. Which is why it's interesting for me to know that now, because you use humor, you use graphic novel as a tool, but your sense of drawing is very different from the kind of painting that you do. So you kept a very simple style, absolutely black and white, keeping it really Spartan. Was that a conscious decision, or is it something that you arrived at?
But, actually comic books or graphic novel, however we call them, it's a literally genre. It's not fine art. Actually, we write with the drawing. You know that better than me. So whatever I actually don't write, I draw them. So like, for example, instead of saying I was sitting in my room feeling sad, blah, 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 I draw it. So basically, so whatever I draw, you read it. So you put a perspective, you read it. You put, background, you read it. You add color, you read it. So you have a rhythm of reading.
So how does drawing help you in negotiating memory? Because your memory plays a big role in all your works.
I try to concentrate on the emotion, because I think, that would be in books, in cinema, whatever. The emotion is the number one. Then for me comes the beauty and the aesthetic, and the last one is the technique. But you have to deliver the emotion. Like what is this emotion? And about emotion, I'm not talking crying and this thing, like anger, whatever. So I know that I have a very complicated and dense story. It has lots of words. It's also lots of dialogue. See, on the top of that, I also add color, and I also add background, and I also make, beautiful patterns, all of that. The rhythm of reading is completely destroyed. I calculate what I want the rhythm of reading to be. So yes, I do it, but then it's something very incredible that happened, because at the beginning, people, they were me, oh, you have such a naive style. You know how to draw like a child. I didn't have any naive style whatsoever. I could not draw better than that. That was it. It happened that it went well with the story, but it's not something calculated. As a matter of fact, I never made nude model, because when I made like my art studies first, that was in Iran. And then when I came to France, I was more into illustration and graphic design and all of that. Mm-hmm. So, the anatomy, I don't know it very well. But drawing, is like a muscle that, you train. The more you draw, the better you draw. So it happened that the first book, I'm drawing more like a child. And as I grow, my drawing grows, and my drawing became grown up as my character was growing up. But this is really complete, it was a coincidence. But at the same time, I was in Atelier de Vosges, and I was surrounded by people like Emmanuel Guibert, Christophe Blanc, I don't know, Joan Sfa. All these people, they draw like they breathe, you just give them the pen, they draw like the motherfuckers.
Yeah, they draw like crazy. They draw like...
Yeah, they draw so, it's like, and I was like, it will take me about 50 years, maybe 100 years, who knows, maybe never, to have that level of drawing. So either I have to sit in my corner, be stressed, saying these guys, that you give them the pen and they do whatever they want, and so and then I'm old, and then I'm dead, and my life is finished, just being stressed, I cannot draw like them. Or I just take what I have, and I do with what I have. And I think the style always comes from what you don't know how to do. Because as you don't know how to do it, you have to find a way, so like everybody was talking about like, oh, this Iranian miniature, and Marjan, she's, repeating the pattern, and, and deep meaning into that. The reality is that I cannot draw, 55 people in 55 different gestures. It takes me too much time. So I just find a way to do the same thing. So it looks like a pattern. So of course, I'm influenced by the art, of my country and all of that, because I've grown up with it. But at the same time, it's the question of budget. But as in cinema, you can have $300 million and make a shit film like what's this guy's?
You don't have to name the film. It's okay.
No, like what's the name? Avatar. I mean, it's a shit film, and they spend I don't know how many $100 million, and then you have I don't know a film of Truffaut, like L'homme qui aimait les femmes or Jules Jim or whatever. These movies, they're made for no money, they're masterpieces. So it's not like because you have more money that you make a better thing. So like. And at the end, it was very funny because I always thought that, I would make nothing. And at the end, I was the one who sold the most books, so, which is quite
because even in La Association, everyone was surprised. And, and La Association has a big club of very, very, very good artists, including you.
Absolutely.
So, and prolific ones. So it was very interesting that this book actually turns things around and actually gives France a new thing to read. And then the English version comes out in a few years later. But you've said once in one of your interviews, I remember you said that, that you never thought this will become a film. I mean, in fact, you've said many times that it's a bad idea to make it a film.
Of course. Yeah. I still can tell you that. Because normally, the adaptation of a book it never works. Made by the author is always a catastrophe. It's true. And then when they proposed me to do it, and I'm like, why the fuck would I do it in the first place? I mean, I've thought about something for 4 years in one way, and now I have to think about the same story for 2 years or 3 years in another way. I mean, why? Why should I do it? The book is successful. And at the same time, I had the little Jiminy Cricket voice in my brain who is telling me, are you stupid? I mean, people are going to pay you, so you will learn something new, which never happens. Normally, you have to pay to learn something new. Here, they were giving me money, so I will learn something new. So in my life, really, the decisions that I always take depends on two questions. Two very simple questions. First of all, if I do this thing, can I die? Okay, the answer is no. Or can they put me in jail, which is for me worse than dying. I mean, if I'm locked, it's even worse than being dead. So if I'm not going to go to prison and if it's not going to kill me, so I make a film, and okay, in the worst of the case, it becomes the worst film of the history of cinema. Okay, I've tried. I've learned something new. In life, either you are rich of your experience or you are successful, but you never lose. I mean, if you do something, anyway, you gain something that would be experience or whatever, or fame or whatever. You gain something. You always lose when you actually don't do something, because then you lose your time, and the time is only thing in the world that when you have lost it, it never comes back. I mean, even when nowadays, if you lose your arm, they give you a bionic arm and you can do weird stuff with it. But time when it's gone forever. So I was like, okay, I will do it. Let's see what happens. But it's the result. And I was so convinced that I would make the worst film in the history of cinema that is probably why.
For the Oscar. Yeah.
Yeah, this is probably why it didn't become like that. And it was horrible for me because, I came from my drawing table when I do whatever I want, like I decide when I want to start working, when I want to stop working.
It's solo, yeah. It's a solo atelier effect, yeah.
And then I'm like with this more than 100 people. So I'm a smoker in the morning, I'm like in very bad mood. So everybody, hello, hello, hello. And I'm like, fuck it, it's like I didn't want to say. And then everybody is drawing like me. And then it was so difficult. I mean, I really hated all the animators for many months. I was like, God, kill them. So I shouldn't say, just this hello and having to be nice. It was really not possible. But then you realize that these people, they're not there, to suck your blood or, just, take your drawing and copy you. It's basically they're giving you all whatever in their heart and talent and all of that. And I really appreciated the work. And suddenly I realized that, oh, Marjan, you're a monkey and you're a social animal. So working with other people is great, because suddenly, it goes somewhere that I was not expecting to go. Sometimes, most of the time, better, further than whatever I could imagine. So yeah, it was a very good experience. And this is the way I quit, making comics. And then I started making cinema. It was just because of that, because suddenly I realized how cool it was to play with your friends in the playground. It's quite fun. Even though sometimes you have to beat them up and get beaten up and bleed and all of that, it's always better than sitting all alone in your room.
So are you trying to say that you're not making comics anymore? You're not sitting solo in your atelier?
But listen, I'm 50 and, being realistic, I probably will live another 30 years. And let's say I would be like super on for 30 years, like all my power, like I'm being like that, Superman and all of that. 30 years is a short time. There's lots of things I have not done. And, I've always been like that. I'm like a car that cannot pull back, I just don't have this thing, I cannot. I just have to go somewhere else. Once I have done, I'm over with something, I'm over. So, no, I will not make comics anymore. It's my past. I'm very happy to have done it. But I cannot go back and do what I did before. I have to do something new. I don't have time for that. I have this urge of trying.
In this session, the world might be taking notice to that. But it's interesting that you're talking about comics, but now its book is coming in Hindi. So for me, this book is actually a forever work in translation. I mean, when you translate your memories from Farsi to French, then it translates into English.
I wrote directly in French, actually. I never
but you translated your thoughts in the little dialogues in your head. You must have translated that from Farsi to English, to French, and then it becomes to English, and then now it comes to Hindi, maybe many more Indian languages. Nidheesh and Aditi, this is the question. I remember Aditi 5 years back, or I don't know, less than that actually. You had made it a mission in your life to get Persepolis out in Hindi. I mean, I remember you were absolutely on it. So this is the book that I have to bring out. It's going to be this in this lifetime. I remember that zeal in you, and I knew that you will bring it out someday. And it's great that it's here. Just tell us a bit about the process of working on a graphic novel in Hindi, because there's practically none. We have a lot of mainstream comics, but Nidheesh and Aditi, I mean, for me, it's like, rewriting Greek in many ways. And then you're translating such a celebrated work. How did the process go about?
So I think it was in 2007 that I got the English edition copy of the book on my way back from New York. And then I couldn't put the book down. And the moment I reached India, I was just trying to understand how to reach out to the author, how to understand the rights and everything. So I was trying to figure out a way to reach to Marjan, and then I got in touch through emails. Judith Oriel was the person who was handling the French book office in India. She was a great help. She put me in touch with the agents, the publishing house, L'Association, and then I think in 2014, I finally heard from Marjan's office that she will be visiting Paris for some days, and she has an off at that time because she usually has a very, very hectic day and timeline. So that was so I had a window of 3 days to get my visa done. And I think Judith really rescued that situation. She helped me get the visa. Now, the concern was to get a boarding and a day-night lodging in Paris. So that's where Namita Gokhale, the festival co-director of Jaipur Literature Festival, came to rescue. And she somehow managed India House with the help of Monica Kapil Mohta, who was the ambassador at that time. And that's how I went and met her at Cafe Sharat's. And that was an amazing meeting. That was a fangirl moment for me, of course.
Yeah,
But,
we remember the Facebook post. Yeah.
yes. So, and the most beautiful thing on which we connected was that we can't deny that the social structure in India and Iran are quite similar. And what a parents can do to a girl child, how they can let her blossom. Because there is a huge similarity between her social condition from Iran and our social condition in India. So, and of course, she spoke at length about Gandhi. She spoke at length about how she connected with the Indian culture. And this whole project just flew off from there. So, like an Indian joint family system raises the child together. There are a lot of people who are helping to bring the child up. I think this book is a product of that kind of emotion. A lot of people came together, a lot of people nurtured the book. And of course, Nidheesh just put the text together because, as Marjan just said, that there are phrases that are sarcastic, there are phrases that are so culture specific that when we had to translate them, we had to make sure that they are translating well to the Indian, to the Indian audience. So there, Nidheesh, as a language expert, did a lot of justice to these sarcastic notes, to these historical perspectives, and put the text in place for me. And thankfully, the book is out here, and we are celebrating it. So this is the story.
It's a very beautiful analogy that you make, that this book is actually part of the Indian joint family system, and different players come in at different points of time, and then Nidheesh comes in like the great grandfather and actually looks into it. Nidheesh,
really funnily, a couple of years ago, I came to India. I was in Delhi, and it was very surprising for me because when the language they were speaking, there are lots of similarities in the words. So I cannot say I understand the whole sentence, but like you say, I don't know, Jurab for the stocks, and we say Jurab, we say Garam, and we say Garm. It's lots of I was with French people, and I was like, oh, they're talking about like that, and they were like, how do you know it? And I'm like, because they're words that I understand, so I know what is the conversation is about. And you have lots of architecture, etc., etc. I mean, historically, we are very, very close actually to each other. We have like a Persian poetry coming from Indian, so it's very, 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 very close cultures, obviously.
In fact, as Nidheesh was saying this afternoon, that Farsi was a part of our system still a few hundred years back.
It was like court language. Like, even during the British time, it was part of the court language. Two of the best poets from Delhi, Amit Khusro and Mirza Ghalib, they were writing in Farsi. And so, it's like not, I mean, if you look at it, like, even geographically, it's not very far from here to say Tehran. But this book, coming from Tehran to France and then English, then coming to India, is like making quite a loop, actually.
But exactly. Then, we made the loop to go to the neighbor's house. So
that's also so Indian. Joint family and then the neighbor's house. That is so
Indian. The neighbor's house just as important, obviously.
Exactly. Yes. So the shared sensibility is also like probably the part of that, and therefore, I mean, I thought, and Aditi and we agreed on that, I mean, all our daughters and girls in India should probably read this book, and it should be part of their growing up, because this has so much of all those elements that they should have, like, the wondering, questioning, having a bit of innocence, and having this, like, typically Indian classified matrimonial ads have that, they should have like tradition, values, and modern outlook kind of thing.
I know.
That. So
homely domestic convent educated English speaking girl. Yes.
Yeah, but I also have to say something. When I met Aditi in Paris, she gave me 2 bracelets. You remember Aditi? And these are my power bracelets. So each time, I feel weak, I put these 2 bracelets, and I give myself like the Wonder Woman look, and each time it gives me lots of energy. So I keep your bracelet in a very beautiful box. So each time I feel weak, I wear your bracelets. So they're always with me.
Lovely. That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
In fact, that opens a very interesting question for me, for both Aditi, Marjan, and George, and Nidheesh, all of you. See, this is also a book on, it's a discussion for me. This book is actually a conversation on gender, which is very relevant to the Indian scenario. Okay? It is a very important book. It is actually a Bible on how to do gender representation in comics in many ways. It is also, for my daughter, it will give her all the ideas of how to be a rebel in many ways. It is also a book that needs to be in conversation. So Marjan, you might say that this book is not a political tool, but you have to agree that book is a great conversation. It's a conversation in progress for a country like India, where gender is a big thing. So the role of the comic book in India is huge. I mean, we use it for gender, we use it for health, we use it for all sorts of educational, informational things. My question to George is, George, that you have a set of comics that you write, which are from a speculative space and now to a political space. And here is a book like Persepolis, which we've all read in our beginning years. Where do you see this book in an Indian space? I ask you Indian space because the systems and societies are so diverse here. So the Malayalam society, Kerala society is very different from the North Indian society. So a book like Persepolis, your thoughts?
When I read it, I think it was mid 2005 or something. I was working on my first book at the time. And that time it felt like this reality that happens far away, this ominous background that she's painted for her story is something that can never happen to us. It's something that happened very far away. It was not our reality at all. Poor people over there, they suffered and all that, but it can never touch us. But right now, when I look at it, or when I say the movie, I'm sure everybody who saw the movie today would have connected directly to what is happening in India right now. How many comic artists have been shut up and have got their cases on, the center is going after anybody who talks against the government. This is something that was very far from the reality at that time. But right now, I think that's where most Indians are going to connect directly. I think that's where we are going to really see that connect. I don't see many parents actually buying the book for the kids. I think the kids should buy it for themselves.
I see many kids asking the parents to buy the book.
Yeah, they should buy it for themselves, and it's not really a children's book as such. So that's when the parents come in and buy it. I think the girls can go out and get it for themselves. And in many contexts, the social part of it is very important that way. I'd like to see more Indians thinking like that, opening up to all these things, and it's nice to see Marjan sitting there and smoking, because nobody does that in a literature festival or a talk like that usually. It's so nice to see her doing what she wants to do. I would rather do that too. So that's nice. On the comic front, I'm very much kicked about it on the comic front, because here is something that opens up the comic and breaks the notion of comics in India. We have this irritating idea that comics in India are supposed to be for children. It's supposed to be superhero stuff. It is not supposed to deal with anything serious. And it's a medium for just a very frivolous kind of medium. I think this one book breaks all that. And to come with something that has this international kind of weight behind it, I hope that it will really open the gates for comics in India. This is the kind of push that we needed for comics. I think I hope this will happen, and especially because this is coming in Hindi right now, and we say that we have the bigger crowd in Hindi, and if it reaches out there and it does really well, I hope it gets translated into Malayalam, Tamil, Marathi, Bengali, all that also. It's because they all have or have had very strong visual traditions, and then somewhere along the way it got lost, and now the graphic novels in general are considered too expensive for anybody to buy. So we need to break all these things and push comics through somehow, and but I'll go back to the political aspect of it, and that's where I'm also working, and the fact that you use humor to break down something that is so ominous and dark in the background, that is what comics can do, really. And there are many stories in India waiting to be told, and people think they can't draw well enough, and I think you've just broken the the feeling they would have had in their head when you explained about how you started drawing, Marjan. Anybody can do it, and it's a really powerful way to do it. And I'm from an advertising background, so we have been selling useless products to a lot of people using images, and images work. We know that images work very well. So, bring it out, bring your own stories from different cultures and backgrounds in India and put it out. Let's see what you can tell with it. And comics are simple. Like everybody can read it, if you write 1,000 words right now on Instagram, nobody's going to read it, but you can see how well the images are doing. So, it's really, I hope this opens up a lot of space for comics. And then, a lot of people can buy my books also, and some people can buy Vishwa's books also. So yeah, it's
so I think multiple languages, multiple forms is I think is the way to go. And the onus will be on publishers, yes, to actually explore different languages. It's not easy doing graphic novels. It's not easy making one. It's not easy selling one. It's not easy publishing one, for sure. But then we are such a small niche of makers that that we must be read. And there's something about us. We do something that puts us in trouble or makes people angry, because we are so easy to read. I mean, yesterday a cartoonist lost his job in India. Yeah, cartoonists are always getting the first flack, but that's I think also a certain power of humor and power of drawing, which keeps coming back to everyone, and to everyone it's a sentiment of hurt that gets into things. So we are definitely.
It's quite unreal how humor makes them scared. It's quite unreal, because the fanatics, humor is a matter of intelligence. To start with, people without sense of humor, they're stupid. We are going to all die. It's this is the future. So this whole thing, you cannot take it too seriously. It's too sad to be taken so seriously. So if we have a little bit of time to live, if we also take it this seriously, and we are all the time, very, that is where a fanatics. The fanatics, they never have a sense of humor. They can never joke with them. So this is the way to recognize them. As I have to go, unfortunately, I just wanted to say something about gender and the girls and all of that. First of all, I'm very happy. Because this gender thing is not a question. The problem is that it's not a fight between men and women. We have 3 men here. One of you more open-minded than the other one, and you have some women that are so into that patriarchal culture. They believe in it so much. Like, oh, my husband should never be in the kitchen. My son, They raise up their son and the daughters differently. So it's not a question of gender. It's a question of celebrating the human being in its totality, men, women, whatever, all together. But for my side, I think, if I have something to say now, because I'm online now, I think for any woman, if we want to go anywhere, we need to misbehave a little bit. A woman who behaves all the time will not go anywhere. And since I was a child, I always heard a real lady would not do this. A real lady would not do that. So, very young, I was like, okay, fuck the lady. So I'm not a lady. What about that? I'm a free human being. So don't call me lady. Don't call me whatever you want. I'm not a lady, but I'm a free human being, and I do whatever I want to do. And if you want to do that, then you have to misbehave. So, and then, I never thought, of myself as a rebellious person. Never. The things that I do, I don't bother anyone. I'm always shocked when people, they say, this book should be forbidden. Just don't fucking buy the book. Don't read it. It's just as simple as that. This film has to be forbidden. So don't go watch it. Who pushed you? Can't you just close your eyes and look, instead of the book, look the other way? Nobody obliges you neither to read it or to watch it. Just don't do it. It's as easy as that. So, the censorship, people, they're miserable. They're stuck in their life. And then if you're free, that reminds them how miserable and stuck they are. So it's better that everybody is in jail. Like that, we don't feel lonely. That's why we don't We don't like the freedom. And then another thing is that, they actually the price of the real freedom is loneliness. If you want to be completely free, then you become a very lonely person. But 100 times, like 1 billion times, I prefer to be alone and free than to be surrounded and in jail. I mean, like, another thing is to be able to learn to enjoy our own company. Then it becomes much easier.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Marjan, before you leave, I just have one question from the audience, which I would really like you to answer. Is one very short question. See, and this is a question that has been coming to me for a very long time, is that graphic novels, bande dessinée, comics have a certain visual power. There's no denying that. People have used it. You have used it. Joe Sacco has used it. Chris Ware is using. You are all using it in a different way. We are all using it in a different way. There's a lot of advice people want, that people who are doing comics about protests, whether it's in any part of the world, whether it's in India, this thing, what advice would you like to give them to make an effective, beautiful, or rather effective comic, who are using comics as a tool to talk about protest?
Listen, my advice is, I have two advice to give. First of all, be completely honest. That means that you don't cheat with yourself. Like I tried in Persepolis not to make out of myself like this superhero-y girl who was always great, because, most of the time I do very bad stuff. Still I continue doing it. I try each time to correct myself and try to be better next time, knowing that, I'm an imperfect person and it will never happen. But just be honest. The first thing is honestly telling a story, not being self-indulgent. You can criticize the whole world if you start criticizing yourself. If you don't criticize yourself, then you cannot just go and give moral lesson to the other one. So first of all, this is this intellectual honesty, and then you have to work. It's not, it's like, it's not, this hocus pocus of chance and, like the stars that are aligned, all of that, is maybe 2-3% of the story. Maybe 10% of the story is that you're talented, you're gifted, you draw a little bit better, you don't draw a little bit better. But all of it is work. The more you work, the better it becomes. And then the third thing is that once you write something, show it to 3 different people. If people, they don't understand what you write, that does not mean that people, they're stupid. That means that you have not told your story in the right way. Because we as writers, comic, or even a movie director, I cannot control if people, they will like my story or not. If I had this power, I would do it, like, oh, everybody love me, everybody buy my book. It is completely independent of your person. You're not in people's mind. It's a matter of who, when, which time, whatever, you don't know. But when we write something, we're actually writing to someone. We want to be read. This is bullshit to say, I write for myself. Nobody writes for himself. In the word publishing, you have the word public. You're writing for a public. So you have to take this public in consideration. You have to, what you want to say has to be understood the same way as you want to be understood. And if these 3 people, they read it, and 2 of them, they tell you, I don't get it, that means that you have to change your way of narrating. So you have to rework. So you have to be open to criticism. But then don't show it to 30 people, because then everybody has an idea and then you will lose your mind. Just 3 people that you really trust. You just give it to that. And don't hide yourself behind this posture, I do my art for myself, I do my thing for myself. This is not true. Any person, even when you're holding, a diary, is with the hope that you will die and, they will find the diary and they will say, oh, Marjan, she was such a sensational, sensitive woman. She had such a big heart. It's always with the hope that somebody else will read what you write. If you don't want nobody to read something, it's like keeping a secret. You don't say it to anyone. Once you say it, it's gone. It's not in your mouth anymore. So work, take the criticism and be honest. So I ended up giving 3 advice.
So that's a much bigger advice on storytelling and writing as such, and drawing as such, and not only about one thing, but actually you've answered 5 questions and with that one answer. So yes. So big thank you, Marjan. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And I hope next time we are going to see each other like
We have been, yeah, we've been in front of each other. Yes, we've been in
yes,
front
and
of
hug and do all these
yes.
things that
Smoke up and have a coffee. Yeah, exactly.
yes, have a coffee, shake hand, do all these things, smell each other, all these things that we're supposed to do as we are human beings.
Yes. So great, Marjan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Okay, so Aditi, one question I have for you is the role of a publisher, and I'm not letting you go because there are bigger questions as a publisher for graphic novels in the future, that too in languages. How important is it? Are there any possibilities further? Nidheesh, it's as much to you.
Yeah. So I always have felt, and I think we had this conversation in one of the literature festivals about a decade ago, Vishwajyoti. I don't know if you recall it. I don't remember the festival, but we talked at length about it. And then Nidheesh and I have been speaking about it for another half a decade, that visual is the next big thing. We need visual stories because we are living in a world where narratives are multi-layered. Narratives are so complicated. And as Marjan just very rightly put it out in front of us, that the more you know, the more you understand in the entirety of the fabric, the more you understand how complicated the issues are in their original in their original form. So we cannot somehow just depend upon the words. We cannot somehow just depend on unilateral narratives. We need to have a visual supplement to just say some very, very complicated and interesting stories. And that's where the graphic novels are needed. So I am constantly, so we produced manga comics a few years ago, and it was a story of how sign language for the deaf and the ones um, who have auditory impairments, um, how the sign language evolved for them. This manga comics was in 4 parts from Osama Mamamoto, and it's called Ungliyon Ka Orchestra. But we worked very hard on the translation again, but it did not strike a chord with the Hindi readers. So, but it was an important book to be done. I am hoping that with Persepolis now in Hindi, we open up to a new way of telling stories and reading stories. Nidheesh has been speaking about putting together a Comic-Con for Indian languages. And I hope we see a day that this dream comes true. You remember, Nidheesh, we talked about it. I think we were in Habitat Center at that time in a festival. So we need a Comic-Con for Indian languages because we have amazing art forms. We have amazing ways of, Vachak Parampara is so much a part of our heritage. Yet we have not utilized it enough by matching the story with the art form yet. So I think this is the need of the hour, and as a publishing house, I am committed to it completely. So let's see what happens in the future.
Nidheesh? Yeah.
So, one of the things that probably, of course, is required in language that I think, collectively as Hindi and Indian society, we need to rescue humor from sarcasm, and that is where these small things will actually come very useful to us and readers and consumers. So that is probably one thing why we should have them in languages, because this will also I think this is a great confidence booster to if somebody who's as kind of a native or anywhere in subaltern or hinterland of India, and any girl or boy who reads this kind of a book, and there are other graphic novels as well. And then probably to my mind, this is the best which we can contribute, and that's also lead to creating that kind of stuff from languages to to the main platform probably. So that is the other thing which this kind of thing will actually encourage. Like, I mean, I don't know if some of us would have seen Bhajju Shyam's London book. He's a Gond painter, and he went to Tara Books has done this amazing kind of work. So this is a Gond painter. Goes to London and paints London as a Gond paintings, and then writes his narratives around it.
And he also paints this the restaurant called Masala Zone in Soho.
So he has one the whole underground train as like Patal Lok.
Yeah, he's more known in Europe than in India. But those are different.
That is the irony. That is the irony of the situation.
That's the irony of the situation, because he's not been published in India, and that
he's published in Hindi also, and he's also published in Hindi, and it has been kind of a bit of a very reasonably successful kind of project. So it's like again about, I think we need to sort of all of us probably sit and think together and do it like projects, rather than just people are lone rangers and bringing their own stuff and that way.
Well, trust you me, graphic novels is a breed of lone rangers. If you put 4 in the room, they will kill each other. So I can give it.
You need more kind of jihadis like Aditi who should be
traveled far and wide.
It's okay. There are 3 of us here. Like nothing happened. But come on, Vishwa. Like keep the spirit up, keep the energy up. Just because like Marjan left the room, you can't like let it all drop now. Okay, there was something that I wanted to like talk about earlier, but I didn't get the time for it. I can clearly see, how the right wing can take this book and say, see, look, this is what happens in a Muslim country, and this is what we are trying to save you from. That kind of narrative, how do we like kind of counter it? And I'm sure it will come, because obviously everybody knows that religion has very little to do with it, and I know that you're all like scared of like losing power, and that's when it comes up. But I see this question popping up over here from the audience, I think, and that's something I had written down and I wanted to talk about also. How do we what do you think? Like, aren't they like going to do that? And they're going to take it and say, like, we're going to save you from this kind of a thing, and then put it again onto the Muslims?
I don't think it's not just about Muslims. As she was saying, that the fanatics are like illiterate, so they need to be.
Yes, of course, yeah. But the narrative is like that. No,
this book is educated, so we need to have more education for that kind of crowd, and that education can only happen when you have more content for them. If you don't have content, I mean, how do we educate them? I mean. Look at, I come from North and this Western UP, Haryana, Punjab, and there was this whole Arya Samaj which was there for like 50, 60 years, just almost like, and we are back to this whole Khap Panchayat and beheading and all of this happening now. This is all clearly political gender Hindu issue. But then it will not come back, or we will not be able to say this unless we have that conversation. So the conversation will start with this kind of content.
But
so I think they should ban it. I mean, I think Manjul is a very good friend, and I'm very, very kind of. First, I was very disturbed of what was happening, but then I'm not sad. I think this is actually making a very good mark on on everybody in this country, that banning a cartoon is actually a joke on us as a society, as polity. So if you want to ban, say Persepolis or any other book in this country, or
no, it will not be banned.
I think this is good
for the market. Like as a publisher, I think you should be very happy about it, because it's going to work in your favor. But it's going to look like that. You're painting.
Like Salman Rushdie wrote once about the countries where all these American flags are being burnt. So somebody is actually making money off like printing those American flags.
So, my take on this question would be that I think I upheld my faith in the judicial system. So, unless the rule of the land, the law of the land doesn't ask us to put the book off shelf, there is no reason for us.
You're not getting it. They're never going to ask you to keep the book off the shelf. They're going to say, like, put it out to everybody, give it for free, because everybody will see what this Muslim country is doing, and we're going to save you from that kind of a future.
I think that this, honestly, there are several strips in the entire book that are so synonymous. You just have to change the background from Iran to an Indian village, or from Iranian city to an Indian street.
Yes.
The situations are so similar today. In fact, when this book was just going to press in December, I could almost see it so clearly. But the thing is that the beauty of the situation is that we are able to see it so clearly, and therefore we are able to make a right parallel, and therefore we are able to understand why this should be read more and more at this hour. Because extremism, either from the right or from the left or from Hindus or from Muslims, is disastrous for any society. So that is the message that has to go out and has to be received in that spirit, that we have to avoid extremism. We have to have a scientific temperament in the society. We have to understand that the education of the girl and the boy child has to be equal rights and opportunities for both the kids. And of course, the society cannot be foolish, cannot be intolerantly foolish in this world. So I think the message is right here. And if anyone tries to, I think the book is out at a very good time. That would be my.
And before any trouble happens, the book has to be read first. And if it's protested after it's being read, it still opens up a dialogue.
Intellectual disengagement is most welcome. Intellectual disagreement is most welcome. Academic disagreement is most welcome. But any kind. See, this situation happened in the history of Vani Prakashan Group when we published Taslima Nasreen in 1994. When Lajja was translated in Hindi and when it reached the streets and the bookstores, there was a huge furor. But the only stand we took as a publishing house is that unless the court decides that this should not be read by the Republic of India, this book will not be removed from the book stands. And cut to more than 25 years of Lajja's history, the book remains one of the most well-read books in the history of translated literature into Hindi. So again, we have to stand, we have to honor the law of the land. And I mean, these arguments have been there in all eras of history. We have to, as intellectually stimulated people, we have to stand by some kind of values, and we continue to do that.
And we would like to think we live in a democratic space where we work with a certain engagement with the democracy. Indian cartooning has survived the emergency. Indian cartooning has in fact diminished in the post-emergency, where the space of the Indian cartoon has been diminished from the newspaper itself. Had the newspapers worked with giving space to the Indian cartoon, the sense of humor, the conversation with humor would have not been perished. Today, everything is coming down to a WhatsApp joke. So that's part of it is our own doing.
Well, won't it be used as Islamophobic propaganda? Is the question. It's not about whether it'll get banned at all. It's right the opposite. Do you think it will be used as some kind of propaganda? Is the question.
No, I don't think so. The narrative is too beautiful. The narrative is too beautiful to be just caught in that kind of mire. It's too beautiful a story to be caught in a mire.
As a matter of fact, Persepolis the film, the Persepolis the book in English market, in Indian market has survived all these years.
Yes,
it's one of the bestsellers. All distributors recognize this book. All booksellers recognize this book. And in fact, there are very few booksellers and book distributors who are actually interested in books these days. I have not met any of them who don't recognize this book or who have no story of selling like hundreds of copies of this book. So this book is a very, very well-known.
I'm only saying that it will sell more, and I'm hoping that we can also ride on the success of those books. Graphic novels get more popular, more people buy my books. Good for us. It's great. I'm only saying that, but there's a nuance there.
We definitely need a lot of Indian graphic novels in different Indian languages.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
That is very true.
That's for
and
sure.
I've been making a lot of stuff without words also. So you don't need to translate it. People just need to get into the habit of reading visuals.
Engaging with visuals, yes.
Reading visuals itself should be seen as a different language. And now you're used to it with your phones and with all your interactive material. And a lot of complex scientific things are also being explained with visuals now. So, don't be close to the reading visuals thing as an Indian reader.
Absolutely.
And, that's why you should probably buy your kids more comics and tell them read these things, because it's going to be good for you. You're going to get a big corporate job and you're going to make more money because you read visuals very well. These software companies, they need it and they'll make you a slave, but they need that skill from you. So I think comics are going to boom even from the economic side. What do you say? Yeah.
So we have George Apupen, the career counselor now from the City of Comics. And
is it time for us to go?
and it's Aditi and Nidheesh. So I think we're going to wrap it up now.
Cool.
And thank you. We had a huge audience today. Thank you for making it. And big thank you. Please keep reading comics. Please engage with Persepolis in Hindi. Much important book of our times. And a big thank you to Christine, Victoria, Lucas, and Arunava Sinha for helping us getting this event through. So a big thank you. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.